And welcome back to another interesting and insightful and entertaining panel, hopefully, from Kaiju Online this weekend. We're here for day two. We are streaming live to both YouTube and to Facebook on the KaijuCast channels. And we are here for a panel to talk with Ultraman Towards the Future star, Dore Kraus. And joining me here to talk with Dore is, of course, Jim Cirinella from Celebrity Icons. Welcome to the screen, both of you guys, and welcome to Kaiju Online.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
How's the weather out there in the West Coast?
It
Very
was like
hot.
up in Portland. It's been kind of cool, but we've got a little bit of a Japan humidity situation happening with the heat and how overcast it is right now. But yeah.
Yeah, I was ready to. I was going to go right up into the mountains today, but I waited till after we finished this, and then I'm going to attempt it. So.
All right, so joining us here is Dore Kraus. Dore is the star. He plays Jack Shindo in Ultraman Towards the Future. And generally what I love to do is sort of hear the story of how somebody found themselves in a position like this. And so, Dore, would you do me a favor and just sort of tell us a little bit about how you came into acting and how you came into the position of being Jack Shindo in this production?
Well, my acting career started very young, not professionally, but the want to be an actor. And it wasn't actually until I relocated to Australia that I really pursued it more so than ever. I actually ran into a film director in an antique shop in Australia, and she was working with Jane Campion at the time, the director, the Academy Award-winning director for the film Piano. And we became friends, and she says, I have a friend who's a casting agent, or actually an actor's agent, and would you like to meet him? Would you? I said, sure. So from there on, I started to pursue work in Australia. It was in Melbourne. The first project that I actually auditioned for was a film with John Savage, the actor from Deer Hunter. And he was actually filming a series of films through a producer, Frank Howson at the time. Back then, they had a tax relief called 10BA in Australia, which allowed them to, make so many films and invest money, without.
I'll be right back. My hotel is collapsing on me. Hold on a second. Continue talking.
Okay. So back then, I auditioned for the film, and they're very interested in using me, but unfortunately, I couldn't work at the time in Australia, and they asked me if I had special skills that they could use to get me a permit to work there. And I was a fencer at the time, and also had an American accent, and so because of that, I was able to start working on the film Hunting. And then not long after, I got a call from my agent, and he says, you know what, they're interested in you for Ultraman. And I said, what's Ultraman? And he said, it's a Japanese superhero, and I never heard of it. And then all of a sudden, the rusted wheels in my mind started turning. And when I was a child, I remember seeing it like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I forgot, maybe in Los Angeles or somewhere in my childhood. And I said, sure. So apparently they were auditioning a number of people. I think there was upwards in the excess of 700 people they auditioned.
Oh, wow.
And so from there is how it began. I was first flown, I believe, to, I think it was Sydney. And Sydney, I met the director and the producer, and they asked me, they interviewed me and asked me to read, and then they asked me to do a martial art demonstration. So I was wearing a 3-piece suit at the time, and I did a number of things, and then I did a jump spinning kick, and when I was in the air, I kicked, and my suit pants ripped right between the legs. So when I came down, I look at the camera, and I didn't think about being on the camera, and I said I just tore my pants, and everybody started laughing. So after that interview, didn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden in the paper there was an article stating that they hired somebody or they found somebody to play Ultraman, and I told my agent, I said, I guess they got a fireman to play Ultraman. And he goes, a fireman? And he goes, yeah. And then he checked on it, and he says, you know what? They just called for you again. They want to see you again. And I said, they didn't cast Ultraman? He says, they cast the fireman as the man in the suit.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So the second audition was in Adelaide. And when I first got there, they brought me into the actual warehouse, and I walked through, and my eyes, I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw cities that were constructed, and I saw robots and the creatures and the animation, and I think it was so amazing. I thought, wow, this is like another Star Wars, and I was really excited when I saw how much effort went into the cities and the props, etc. And I was excited, and they interviewed me again. And then I went outside. They say, we want to talk things over. And I was kind of in a room that had a door that actually you could go outside, and I needed some air. So I walked outside, and the first thing I saw was this man with a giant box, and he was trying to throw it in the trash bin. So I see him, and it looks like it's going to fall on him. So I run, and I grab the box behind him, and I help him throw it in the bin. The guy turns around and he looks at me and he goes, I guess you heard. And I said, I heard what? He goes, oh, they didn't tell you? I said, no. Oh, I'm sorry. He says, I'm the executive producer, Gus. You got the part as Ultraman.
Oh,
and
awesome.
That's the first time. So I guess my feat of pushing the box into the thing was part of it. But that's actually the essence of the Ultraman.
He was executive producer and janitor, I guess.
Yeah.
he was throwing things away, I guess.
Yeah.
How involved was Subaraya Productions in the actual making of the series?
Again, you had two cultures. You had the Japanese and you had the Australian, and very, very different in beliefs in everything. I mean, from the clothing I wore, haircut I had, everything was very different. Work ethics were very, very different. Australians were, hey, you can do that tomorrow, Mike. No worries, sit down, have a beer. And the Japanese are just go, 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 go. And I guess the Japanese wanted me to wear a silk suit in most of the episodes, and the Australians wanted me to wear outback stuff. So there was that clash. And I remember them sending me to get my hair cut because I had hair down to my shoulders. And the producers were both on either side of me, and they were both telling him how to cut my hair. Everybody has that same situation. When I did Mission Impossible, I was also I had long hair at the time, and I was walking down the hallway, and I had a role where I was military, and the executive producer Hayes, I forgot his first name, Robert Hayes, but he was walking down the hallway, and he looks at me and says, "You know, you're going to have to get a haircut. Is that okay?" So my hair was always a problem in many projects in the film industry. But
so tell us about some of your co-stars, like Ralph Cotterill.
Well, Ralph, I guess it's pronounced Ralph Cottrell, I think.
Cottrell?
Yeah, that's how I heard it as when I was working with him.
Right.
He's Richard Burton II, or the third. I guess Richard Burton II. He's Richard Burton III. He was a heavily trained RSC actor, and of course he was that was his life. He was a Shakespearean actor and definitely showed it in everything he did. Interesting guy. I remember when I first met him, he just kept staring at me with this kind of almost like a mischief, kind of a leprechaun grin, and just looking at me and analyzing me. And I guess he was trying to understand maybe why they hired me or why, how I fit into the scenario or whatever. But I remember that distinctly. As time went on, he was a very professional guy, and he had a lot of experience. And it was very admirable to see somebody with such experience, because it made you realize how little experience you had. So you definitely learned a lot by watching it.
I'm curious.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm just kind of curious. Like, so you were hired for the job to be Ultraman, and you were a little unfamiliar with the character before the gig. How much time did it take to prep for that role before you guys started filming?
Well, the problem is that we were filming multiple episodes per day. So you'd film like scene 5 from episode 2, and then right after that you'd be doing scene 8 from episode 3, all because of location. So they wanted to utilize one location for budget purposes. So every time you use that location in any of the episodes, they wanted to film all the scenes that day or that 2 days or whatever. So it became an extreme problem in the sense that the actors had to know where they were, what they were doing at the time, what was happening. So that did cause a lot of break in I would say, the flow, energy flow, or character flow. So that was extremely difficult. Absolutely. Yeah.
So the entire run of the series was filmed at the same time, all the episodes.
Yeah, each section of each episode, it really depended on the location. So every episode was filmed, different times, only because of the location.
So like when the team is in the headquarters, you would have done all those scenes at one time.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I remember one scene where I think I was walking down the hallway in the Yuma headquarters. I think I was with Gia Carides, and there was a few lines, and I was ready. I was going to go on set, and then they said, "Oh, we decided to change the script," and they give me the script, and it's almost a full page of dialogue. And I'm looking at it, and I said, "How much time do they have?" And I said, "Well, we're going to shoot it in the next 20 minutes." So I'm looking at it, and I'm going, "Okay, no. So then I memorized it. I have a good memory. I knew that in school because I was able to look at a page and remember it all. And but what was interesting is that I was getting ready to shoot, and then they come up to me. "We decided not to use that script. Here's another change," and then there was like a completely different paragraph or something, and that went on through the series too. But I distinctly remember that scene because the first change was a full page. So, yeah.
I actually, until recently, I didn't even realize that I had seen any of this show. Essentially, just to give some of the viewers a little backstory with me and Ultraman Toward the Future. When I was in college, I had a buddy that loved Godzilla movies, and so he and I would sort of get together and hang out and watch stuff. And then one day, he had an Ultraman. It was Ultraman Towards the Future, but it was on VHS tape. I don't remember anything about it except for the fact that he popped it in. And I had never, ever seen Ultraman before in my life. And so your Ultraman was literally the first one introduced to me back, I don't even know when. This would have been probably about like 1994 or 5 or something like that. And I didn't seek it out after that. But when I started getting into the old school stuff, I mean, I don't know about how anybody on the watching this now feels about Ultraman, but I am a newbie to the whole thing, and I absolutely love jumping into it as an adult and like learning about this kind of stuff, learning about that there was an Australian production and that I had actually seen an episode of that way back in the day. So again, just really, really thrilled to have you here and to be able to share some of these stories with the viewers. Jim, did you have?
Well, it was on. It was broadcast Saturday mornings originally.
Oh, really?
I forget what channel. If it was Channel 5 or Fox.
KTL. Yeah, it was Fox. Yeah.
Fox. Yeah.
I know that. Yeah. Yeah. Because I came back to us. Go ahead.
Well, what's interesting is it's really the precursor to them bringing Power Rangers over, even to the extent that Bandai. It's really like first Bandai America's first offering, where these Ultraman hero figure and the monster figures, and it just didn't take off the way Power Rangers did. Also from the toys, that was literally their next offering. Was the boxes even looked kind of similar, and it's it's the first Japanese first production of a Japanese series, that has the the Defense Force team, but they're not Japanese, obviously, because it's a Australian production, and it's it's got everybody in there. It's got the women. It's got a African American man, or was he Australian?
No,
was it Lloyd?
Yeah, Lloyd. That was I forgot his name. Rick Adams.
Rick Adams.
He was an American living in Australia. Yeah.
Right, so
actually, go ahead.
Well, so here you have this very diverse team, and of people playing kind of like a staple of Japanese tokusatsu, and 3 years later, they introduced Power Rangers, where it's also a Japanese team of 5, but now they've put a Chinese woman in as the Yellow Ranger, an African American man as the Black Ranger. It was kind of very contrived the way that they did that. Whereas Ultraman was, Ultraman Towards the Future was more, it was just a better presentation. It made sense, the team, the way that they had it built up.
There's a natural diversity. Is that
right? It didn't. Ultraman Towards the Future. It didn't.
Right.
They weren't forcing diversity on everybody. They hit all the marks. He's got Dore is Jack Shindo. Gia Carides is the kind of the female, the love interest, which is always there was always at least one woman on a Ultraman team, but she would always have a close relationship with the hero, the guy who would transform into the Ultra hero. You had your comic relief Charlie, your headstrong kind of like tough guy in Lloyd, and then you had your kind of stuffy but loyal team leader with a Shakespearean actor Ralph over there. Right. So yeah, it was a really good mix, and it just seemed. I remember seeing it, as an adult on TV during its broadcast, and going, "Wow, there's an Ultraman, and it's Ultraman series that has Caucasians in it," and but it seemed very, very natural.
I think they had to dub it because
I'm gonna have to fix this again. You could take me off.
Oh, it's all good.
Oh my gosh.
I would say, I think that I really know why I believe the Power Rangers overtook us was they. I don't know why, but they decided to make it a green show. So everything was about protecting the environment, and I remember distinctly them saying that they wanted to cut out violence out of the series.
Oh, okay.
And obviously, I wanted fight scenes, and I wanted to do martial arts, and they wanted it, but they wanted to tone it down. And I truly believe if they would have done more of that, it would have overtaken Power Rangers.
Well, I think Power Rangers had the same. They also had the same issue that it was they were trying to. The networks were trying to get them to tone it down. But the other advantage of to me, which makes Ultraman Towards the Future more genuine, is it's a complete show. So all the special effects, everything was done in in Australia in the original production, whereas Power Rangers is this weird kind of hybrid. You're
Right.
bringing over all the action scenes, all the design from Super Sentai, and kind of throwing away the meat of it, which is the characters that everybody likes, and just kind of shoehorning in a bunch of Americans. And like I said, the diversity was kind of very forced. So I think if people had brought over, or if Toei had brought over Super Sentai and just dubbed it, kids would have appreciated it just as much as they appreciated Power Rangers. But there was this weird thing that, well, you can't have foreigners on a TV show for kids. It's got to be Americans for American audiences. It's kind of weird.
Really
So,
ridiculous as a kid
yeah.
who grew up watching Japanese television
Right,
in America, right? Yeah.
So that was the cool thing about, to me, as an adult watching. Well, I mean, it's 30 years ago, but seeing Ultraman after seeing Ultraman Towards the Future after seeing Ultraman 1966 as a kid on television, I completely accepted that. Completely was at home with, just like every other fan was at home with watching Japanese actors. They seem no different than American actors, and Ultraman Towards the Future had that nice transition to bringing the concept of this Japanese tokusatsu series outside of Japan, and having it produced outside of Japan. I don't think it was as if you've seen the follow-up that was done in Hollywood, I don't think that was as successful a transition.
Well, they didn't have to dub it to a certain extent, but there was an Australian English versus American English problem in that many of the person writing the script, I think his name was Larson or something, but he imbued a lot of Australian colloquialism or phrases, and when a lot of times I didn't even know what I was saying, and I said, "Oh, he spit the dummy," but a lot of this wasn't associable to Americans watching the show. So it was in a way a kind of an odd language, and maybe they should have dubbed it.
So was there some pressure during? I don't want to say pressure. Was there some editing during the production to make it more for American audiences? I mean, was that the target that they were going for?
I mentioned that many times, but basically they didn't want to. The writer was very adamant about what he was doing. Like most writers, they don't want their writing edited, and he was very, 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 very adamant about that. And I wanted to change this and that, and I was basically said, just do it as he wants it. So that's what happened. So I was saying phrases. We were all using Australian phrases, which didn't connect with a lot of people in America or other countries. Yeah. So in essence, it's almost like Japanese, speaking Japanese.
That's funny. I only know one Australian phrase that was like, it's shocking to Americans. It's like, I'm not even going to say it because it's not family friendly. But it's like they have so many phrases that just mean something completely different. Like here, it's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that the common one that's really odd is fair income, mate. People say fair income, just means dinky die. And that just means truly, or really, or truly. In Japanese, it'd be honta desu ne.
Right, yeah. So, what was the reception like in Australia for Ultraman Towards the Future?
In Australia, it wasn't good, and the reason for first of all, it never aired in Australia. Okay.
See, I didn't know that. I'm bad.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of problems with the production. Mainly, the Japanese they went over budget by millions of dollars. The product was packaged, taken it out of Australia, and the debt was left at South Australian Film Corporation. So there's a lot of animosity.
Oh, okay.
And that was it. And it became the bad child, or the black sheep of the Ultraman series. Basically, Subaraya wanted to sweep it under the table. They didn't want anything to do. And that essentially is what occurred. Because of it, it never aired in Australia. So even to this day, I don't think it's aired in Australia.
Oh wow!
But obviously, there's access to it elsewhere. There was a lot of litigation with the series. When I moved back to the U.S., and a very good friend of mine who was in the film industry, she called me up not long after I got back, and she said, "Oh, I see they're selling a doll of you on television." And I go, "What are you?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, right after your show, they were advertising a doll of you for sale." I said, "Well, does it look like me or no?" She says, "Well, they used you in the series, transforming on it." I said, "Oh, really? So they're using me to sell it?" And they go, "Yes." I said, "Okay," because in my contract it didn't state anything for merchandising or anything. And so I turned on TV to try to find it, and I couldn't find it. I said, "I don't know what she was talking about." So I decided to turn on the recorder, and I had it going for 10 hours or something. And then the next day I kind of zipped through it, and all of a sudden I thought, "Oh, there it is." And they were selling the toy, the doll. And there was a doll of me, a really small, about 3 inches tall, with a big, the Ultra doll. And basically they used my transformation, scene with me and to sell it. And that was
in the so what Dore's talking about is in the advertising. Not only did they use his likeness, and there's a small Jack Shindo figure with a larger doll. In fact, I have one over here. I'll go grab it, but in a second. But
right.
Another important thing, because I work on these kinds of rights all the time, is right to publicity, right to likeness. They used his sequence in the commercial. Now, I remember the commercial they were selling the monsters, they were selling the Hummer, or not the Hummer, was the Hummer the
aircraft?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The salt.
And then the salt top was, right. What we would call the Hummer, a Jeep type vehicle. So they had all this stuff in there. They were using his transformation scene, holding the what was it called, the Delta Plasma pendant.
Pendant, right.
And that's a big no-no. You can't do that with actors unless you work that out ahead of time in their contract.
True. And then my agent told me, "Hey, they're either that's a violation," and unfortunately, if I was a good person, I would have walked away and not said anything. But I felt that was an injustice to me. So I had litigation towards the American establishment of Subaraya, the America, and we settled for what I think was a fair amount for using my likeness. But that was also more problems in litigation, in addition to many other things. And I guess that's what suppressed the series a lot, just all the problems and miscommunication.
Yeah, that's very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, it was. And it had a lot of potential. And there was originally slated to be a lot more episodes, but of course it never came to fruition because of the budget.
Well, a lot of people who are watching live have voiced how much they like Ultraman towards the future. So you definitely have some fans out there. It's good to know, right? Especially since I had no idea it didn't air in Australia, man.
Yeah, never aired in Australia.
So while we're waiting for Jim's hotel renovations to be finished,
See, Jim, you should always use real props.
There was none of these problems yesterday, and I don't know why it's giving me a hard time today. It must be because I'm not on the East Coast, or I'm not on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, and it's the weather.
Yeah. Well,
Wait a minute, I'm grabbing the figure.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. Go ahead.
no, I was going to let you go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that it's interesting how I came into these conventions because it was Jim I met at. I think I went to one of them that was in Los Angeles, and I never attended any kind of Comic-Con or any kind of convention. And I knew it was Japanese stuff, and I thought, oh, that might be interesting. So I went there, and I was watching. I think this is Howard, the Ultraman Howard, and I was in the audience, and all of a sudden, this guy sitting in front of me, kind of at an angle, he turns around and he looks at me, and he jumps out of his seat, and he goes, Dore Kraus, that's you. And I go, yeah. And he goes, I'm Wilder. I don't know what his first name was, Rick Wilder. He's the director of Howard. And so we started talking about Howard and Great. And I think it was at that convention I met Jim. Was that? I think that was it.
Was that Japan World Heroes?
No. This was 25 years ago.
Oh my gosh!
Oh,
but I think John Roberto.
yeah.
He already had contacted you, and next thing I know, you were coming to one of the New York conventions.
Oh, that's right.
That's where we first met, and then you did one or two of those, and then we did the one in Chicago.
That's right.
You did a G-Con proper in Chicago, so he was at one of those, and then I lost touch with Dore until Japan World Heroes, maybe 4 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were just there for one day with Scott Zillner invited you.
Oh, I was. Which one was Sunny Chiba? That was the one recent, wasn't it? Or, no.
Well, that was after we got. We started working together,
okay.
And you came out to Chiller, and I had Sunny Chiba there as well. So.
Oh, that's right.
Here's. I don't know if we can see that, but there's.
Oh yeah, there you go.
The Ultraman.
Oh yeah, that's the
figure.
Yeah.
There's little. There we go.
Oh yeah. I guess they came in blue and orange, and I guess the blue ones are very rare.
This is green right here, so it's my green screen is making it disappear. But this one is actually you can't see it, but it's you signed it to my wife Cheryl, so I can't abscond this one if I want. I'm sure I have another one tucked away somewhere. When we moved, I found this one.
You can't resell it, that's what you're saying?
Or I can't keep it for myself because it says Dear Cheryl on it. So.
Oh, you know what's interesting? Well, what's interesting about those toys is that because of what occurred, I think the production of the toys was very small. So I think this is a case where they probably are going to become rare and have value as opposed to an item that's made in, they say, a collector's item, edition, and this, because usually those never have any worth. But I think because there's so little of these out there, it might be worth something. So.
Well, it's also early '90s. Really, the collector market hadn't really hit yet, where people were kids were still going to the store to buy these to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And in the mid '90s, toys that were made for kids, the collectors started, basically ransacking the stores to buy everything, not leaving anything left for the children. So,
that's how I got mine. My mother actually was so excited about the series. She went to KB Toys and she bought all the monsters. So
Oh, that's
they got
a
all the
good mom.
postures
That's a good
and
mom.
everything. Yeah. And I still have him because of her. So
Fantastic.
that's great.
Jim, did you want to show off some of these photos in the slide share thing, the screen share?
Sure, you can go right to them if you want.
Well,
So it's there's really nothing. These are just some pics we have of Dore. It's really difficult. Whoa, it's really difficult finding stills from this show because, as you know, it was shot on film but then edited on video. So the masters are pretty much, are going to be broadcast video quality.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for example, they recently released this maybe 2 years ago on Blu-ray in Japan, but there's not so much you could do with it in high definition because it was edited on video.
I heard the quality of the Blu-ray is the same as the the original.
Right. Yeah, it's going to look like video. You can't do much with it. So.
Well, these photos that you have, I think, were taken by the set photographer. And
yeah, these are photos that you gave to me because, like I said, there's really wasn't a whole lot of publicity.
No,
stills.
and he was actually, I mean, it was kind of one of those around the corner things. He had the overcoat, and he goes, "Hey, I can get you some copies, if you pay me directly." And I said, "Sure." So basically, he says, "What would you like?" And I said, "Well, give me one of these, one of these." And then, he came back, and I'd give him the cash. So, yeah.
So this here is a screen grab from the video. But
that's the
really like the only one that we could get.
Yeah, I remember you used those for the last convention. I think.
Right.
I said I haven't seen that one.
I always thought this story arc with Gudis. This was kind of interesting because they kind of wrapped it up mid-season, and it was like it had like a big finale. Where he's is that your bird?
Yeah, sorry about that. When he doesn't get attention, he starts to scream, and he might be coming over. The parrot might be coming over here. Kiwi, hi Kiwi.
He maybe wants to be on, part of the online chat, so maybe bring him over here. But,
our next panel featuring Dore Kraus's parrot.
Yeah.
Kiwi is
He'll be the moderator. Kyle and myself, we won't be needed. But so the Gudis story arc is a really cool story, and like I said, it's kind of weird that it wraps up mid-season, so that when you get to the last episode, there's almost like another climax where the world is going to end again, and Ultraman is able to stop it at the last minute. But was that always determined to be that way? Do you remember, or was the Gudis story arc supposed to be the last episode?
Yeah, the writer. I didn't get a lot of time with the writer, and I was very interested in the Gudis, in the beginning, and then I guess I don't know what happened, but it tended to kind of deviate from the story, but still there, and then I guess they decided to bring it back and emphasize it more. But I don't know why. I wasn't privy to that information, but it's very parallel to the world today, So the Gudis is running amok right now, and the world future we're wondering about. So, but
somehow I think COVID-19 would be a lot easier if it was like a giant worm on a planet somewhere. And we could just, we could fight it that way instead of what it actually is. So here you are with your co-star Gia Carides. Tell us about acting with her and your interaction during the production with her.
Well, it's interesting because I think at the time I wasn't, I couldn't appreciate a lot about Gia at the time. Because I was dealing with my own, how they say, your own demons and your own ego, and she really had some great experience in acting prior to Ultraman, and she was, I think she did was it called Far Lap, which was a Australian movie about the Far Lap, the racehorse, and she had a numerous experience, and she knew what she was doing, and she definitely used that, and unfortunately for a lot of us, we didn't have the experience that either Ralph Cottrell or Gia had, and it created some not good energies, but nothing very bad. But one scene that I kind of voiced it on, but not verbally. In this scene right here, the photograph that you have, she's been infected with a gudis. And the way they showed that was they put a film of glycerin on her. So they had this glycerin on her arms and her body, and she had the flight suit also. That's Rodan in the background.
Someone in the chat said it sounds like a kaiju.
Yeah. And it was we were filming, and that day we were in these construction fields where they were building a skyscraper. I forgot where. I think it was in Adelaide, and it was a pit. It's the early development of a building, a site, and I had to carry her across this site, and there was stones and bricks and stuff, and she was covered with this gel, glycerin, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was kind of tired, and she just started to irritate me more and more and more, and I was carrying her, and she was slipping out of my arms, and finally I just let her go, and she went smack on the ground. But I actually recently well, not recently, but I think last year or maybe a year or two ago, talked to Gia on the phone. It was kind of a freak thing because I was having lunch or brunch with a friend of mine not in Malibu. We were in somewhere in LA, in I think Venice or Santa Monica, and he says, "Oh, Dore." My friend says, "Dore, I've got a friend coming to meet me. You don't mind?" I said, "No." He said, "He's an actor." I said, "Oh, okay." So he came in and he sat down and we were talking, and then we got into work, acting work that we've done, and then I told him we started talking about Ultraman, and I says, "Yeah, and the actress is Gia." He looked at me and he was dead silent. He looked at me and he says, "I just went hiking with Gia last week." I go, "What do you mean?" "She's in my acting classes." And I go, "Really?" And he goes, "Yes." And he goes, "Hang on." So he gets his phone and he dials her up and he talks to her and he says, "I got somebody here that you should talk to." And he put her on. So we had a nice conversation. Yeah, I hadn't talked to her, since the show, so a long time. And she had a daughter, I think a 13-year-old daughter. She used to be married to Anthony LaPaglia, and I guess no longer. And we talked, and it was a great experience. Brings back memories.
Fantastic. Jim, do you want to? We got about like maybe 8-9 minutes left before the end of the panel. Do we want to try and take some questions?
Take
from the
some
audience?
questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to scroll back in the history just to see if we had anything from earlier. I know I told everybody to sort of hold questions until the end, but if you have a question, go ahead and pop it right there in the chat, the live chat, and I will grab some of my favorites here. While we're waiting, I guess I would ask you, how long were you actually in Australia?
Oh, I forgot. It's been so long ago, but quite a long time. Decades, a decade or two.
All right. So Matt is asking, Dore, did you watch any Godzilla movies when you were a kid? Were you familiar with the giant monster franchises?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I distinctly remember the son of Godzilla, Minya, that blew the smoke rings, and because he's so unusual looking, and he was kind of chubby and had that baby fat, and I don't know what it was, but I liked him, and I liked the Godzilla. The more modern one was it Raymond Burr? There was Was that
Yeah,
Raymond
yep.
Burr? Or,
Yeah, Raymond Burr's in the very first one, the Americanized version. Yeah.
And then they bring him back again in the 80s.
Oh yeah. I think I saw those too. So I've seen most of the Godzilla and the Gamera, and I wasn't a person that watched it all the time, but I did. I have seen them all.
Mark Rodriguez is asking, what was your favorite of the episodes to work on?
Oh, definitely. I enjoyed the last two, and also the 12 and the 13. And I believe there was one where I was able to choreograph the fight scene, which was when I had the confrontation between Stanley. And what was interesting about that is you had that classic evil and good battle, the personification of the devil and the highest one. And I wish it had more dimension and there was more interesting interaction, but I found that interesting. And finally, we had a fight scene, and that was I enjoyed doing that because ultimately that's what I wanted to do in films when I was young. It's something that I was able to kind of do something a little bit. Unfortunately, not much more, but that was one scene I enjoyed. And also the last two episodes, I think, mainly because a lot of the 12 and 13 were filmed towards the end of the production, and I think I started to just feel comfortable in what was going on. It took a while because there were so many changes occurring all the time, and I think that's why it was a little pastiche or kind of choppy because of the different interactions. I mean, a film project is always like a machine with many gears, and you're just one of the gears.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to be something great, all the gears have to be turning in synchronization to create, this moving machine that communicates beautiful ideas and thoughts and a positive, interesting energy that conveys, human emotions. And unfortunately, when you have a machine that some of the gears are turning at different rates, some of the gears are going backwards, and the larger gears, which is Australia and Japan, are going in opposite directions.
They're on two different machines. They're not even on the same machine.
but for it to come out as well as it did, considering all those factors, I think it came out good for what was there. Absolutely.
A couple of people asked, did you actually ever get to put on the Ultraman suit? Did you ever try it out?
No, I was a little bit too smart for that. It's actually the fireman that was hired for the suit actor. He actually was quit. He couldn't do it because he fainted, I think, and it was so hot in there that he passed out, I believe. And they hired another guy after that.
How many episodes did he do, or at what point in the production did he leave?
Very early. I think he was gone within the first month or first 2 weeks. I would say. Yeah, he was gone right away.
How involved in the tokusatsu or the special effects filming did you get to be, or were you involved in it at all?
You mean in the actual special? You mean the monster scenes and things?
Yeah.
I was completely sequestered from that. I had no interaction with the monsters or anything. The guys were kind of interesting that worked on this effects, and I think they were brilliant. Some of the stuff they did, and I think that was a really positive side of the filming, is to see these guys, doing effects how they did it and the results they got. That was kind of an interesting thing. I actually ran into one of the guys, believe it or not, in a bookstore in the U.S. And he walks in and he goes, "Dore," and I look at him and I says, "Yes," and he goes, "I worked on Ultraman," and I couldn't believe it. It was like bizarre. So, yeah, you run into people that in your past, and it's strange. You're at a point in your life completely, years away, and you're in a different country or a different something, and all of a sudden somebody's there that you interacted with.
The last question I'm gonna grab from the chat here is: were you able to keep any props from the show?
They only offered your clothing that you wore, and of course, it was fit me really well. So I bought the clothing, and no props, no props at all, nothing at all. So that was that. I would have liked to have had the pendant, but they kept those, and I guess they remade those pendants, and they were selling those recently.
Oh,
Yeah.
So,
Wait,
yeah.
so you're telling me the original was a prop? It didn't actually work?
Didn't work. I don't think it worked. No. Well, actually, yeah. Well, actually, I guess they had the one that I wore, which didn't. I don't think it worked. And then I think they filmed the actual the hand. My hand. I had my hand out, and then they brought in another prop that actually had the light. So the one I wore did not. Yeah. Hey, Rodan. Kiwi.
Note to self: next time the bird is not included.
Or
in
the
any
bird is
content.
more included. More.
Or is
included,
more?
yeah.
Well, you give him his own chat, so he can say all his.
Oh man, well I gotta say thank you so much, Dore, for being part of this experience, this online event. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you to Jim for bringing Dore, and for Celebrity Icons for hooking us up with guests for this.
Thank you. Yeah. And thanks for all the people that continue to support the show and to bring back good memories for me, and perpetuate this positive energy. And I just think it's great that people are continuing, like we do these online things at a time like this now, when everybody is, we're kind of unsure about the future. But I think if we just continue to do things that help our mental stability or our mental health, and help us to go and conquer these things with time and until things get better, I think they're the greatest things you can do. Your hobbies and your interest and your love for instance, kaiju films and movies, and that's what's great. And you're doing a great service to all the people that use that as their crutch or their hobby. It's fantastic, and I hope everybody's safe and things get better eventually, and we come to some kind of fruition with this this nasty goodness out there.
That's right.
If I still had my real pendant, I would change and I would go out there and take care of the COVID goodness for everybody.
Excellent.
And that would be it. But to be safe, everybody. And thanks, Jim, for everything. Always connecting with it.
All right, guys.
I really wish you were my age and Jim back then.
I probably would have advised you not to take the role.
Hindsight is 2020.
Yeah. So.
Uh-oh.
All right. Well, now that Jim's hotel is falling down again, I think that's a perfect time for us to end this. Thank you to everybody watching live. Our next panel on the Kaiju Cast channel is actually about Ultraman. It's called Our Hero Ultraman, being put on by Bob Johnson, Keith Aiken from Sci-Fi Japan, and I believe Gaz Gretzky is going to be joining them, an artist. So stay tuned for that if you are part of the playlist, or we'll see you later on throughout Kaiju Con Line. Jamata.
Bye.